Hello, everybody. I am absolutely thrilled to be with you today at ChangeNOW. Before we start our amazing session, I'm going to ask all of you to close your eyes, and we are going to take 3 very deep breaths because we need to clean the energy. We are all meeting lots of people. So please close your eyes, and we're going to breathe whenever you're ready. Okay. Thank you very much. Whenever you're ready, open your eyes again, or you can close if you want to just listen. I am really happy to be with you today and to moderate this amazing session. We have an honor to have such amazing guests coming on stage right after me. So our amazing guests are going to show us how connecting to our deep consciousness and using the power of imagination are absolutely vital in driving systemic change. We won't change nothing if we don't change ourselves, basically. Please stay with us until the end, because we're going to have a few surprises with artists coming. I'm not going to say more right now. It's now time to welcome our first speaker. And you might think we're only going to listen to the incredible Rob Hopkins, but no. Actually, he's going to... Sorry, what's going to happen right now with Rob is that it's a deep experience of inner transformation through imagination. And I understand that Rob is actually going to play us some extraordinary rare recordings from the future. Again, I won't say more, you will discover that with him in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, please make a round of applause for Rob Hopkins.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the most spectacular place I've ever given a talk in my life. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to share some pictures with you. So I need to go through these things, I think. No, what's that? Oh, yes. How do I go backwards? This is all very... See, you're getting a sneak peek here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about imagination, and I'm going to talk a little about the future. At the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, on their window, it says, any useful statement about the future should at first seem ridiculous. I feel like as a movement of people who are trying to change the world in this tiny amount of time that we have, we're much too nervous about being ridiculous. I'm really here to urge you all, please, in the work you do, to be much more ridiculous, to be as ridiculous as you can. The idea that we're still going to change things with small little incremental steps is just absurd. Any idea that people come up with that doesn't seem at least a bit ridiculous is not ambitious enough at all. Recently, the United Nations published a report where they said any chance of staying below 1.5 degrees is over unless we see what they called a rapid transformation of society. So all the newspaper headlines and magazine covers went with headlines like this: 1.5 is finished, say goodbye to 1.5. Nobody said, why don't we do that rapid transformation of society thing? Why do we find it so much easier to make a headline like that than to say, let's have a rapid transformation of society? That would be really cool. It's not like it's working amazingly well at the moment as it is already. So I'm here to share with you something very exciting that's happening in my town where I come from. Inspired by this, a T-shirt I saw a young woman wearing at the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington. I've been to the future, we won. Gave me goosebumps. Made me think, how different would our activism be if we worked like that, if we spoke like that? So in my town, not many people know about... Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is an amazing woman called Rashida Phillips. She runs a project called Black Quantum Futurism. She works by day as a lawyer advising people in her city who are being kicked out of their homes because of gentrification. And at night, she runs this thing called Black Quantum Futurism, where she uses time travel as a kind of radical activism. She doesn't gather people's oral histories, she gathers people's oral futures. And she says, in the West, we talk about time as a linear process. We go past, present, future. She says in African understandings of time, traditional understandings, it's more like a wheel, and we're in the middle. And from that place, we can access many different futures, many different future outcomes and future scenarios. And so, as I said, in my town, we are developing, we have in fact developed the first fully functioning time machine in the world. Ooh. Ah, you're too kind, thank you. And with our time machine, we regularly, this is my colleague Kit, and we regularly travel together to 2030. But it's a 2030, it's not a utopia, it's not a dystopia. It's the 2030 that resulted from us doing absolutely everything we possibly could have done. It was the most exhilarating time to be alive. So I want to tell you about a recent trip that we took to 2030. You might like to think of me as the Marco Polo of the climate movement, here to tell you an extraordinary tale of that 2030. And we started here in this street. We programmed our time machine for 2030. We pressed go. And then when we opened the door again, this was the place that we stepped out into. The air smelt amazing. The bird song was so much louder. There was a much stronger sense of hope and possibility. People could see the world around them starting to change. And my friends, the bicycle rush hours of 2030, I don't have enough words for how extraordinary the bicycle rush hours of 2030 were. Now, when you go into a big city like Paris, you don't see those big signs that tell you where all the car parking spaces and how many empty spaces there are. You have that for bicycles. For some reason, in Paris, all the street signs are now in Dutch. Something very strange happened in 2026 that nobody wanted to talk to me about. But anyway, so all the underground car parks have now been, because we don't need them for cars anymore, they're repurposed for bicycles, full of thousands and thousands of bicycles, because we realized that for every €1,000,000 we spent on bicycle infrastructure, it saved us €38 million off the national health budget. So the economics changed, and cycling just became a completely normal thing because we built the infrastructure. One of the things that I love to see was that now in 2030, when we build new buildings, we hardly use concrete at all anymore, because in 2023, it was responsible for 9% of carbon emissions. Now when we build using materials from where we are. We build using materials from the region. We visited this building, built using entirely structural timber. If you stood on the top of here, you could see where those trees came from. Straw bale insulation in the walls, clay plasters, beautiful natural homes, very easy to keep warm in, but they created a whole new economy of local building materials. Everywhere we went, we saw people mobilizing to close the streets that they live in. This, a few years ago, had been full of cars. It had looked like that. People were very proud to show us this picture. This is what it looked like back in those days of 2023. This is what it looks like now. And now in 2030, one of the biggest growth industries we see is taking up tarmac, taking up concrete, because people realized in that hot summer of 2022 that concrete and tarmac above 36, 37 degrees kill people. And we had to get rid of it, and it led to cities that were so much more, the air was fresher and so much more diversity in those places. So when we look back from 2030, back to 2023, what were the things that we could already see happening that were the beginnings of this? People had started to draw the future. This is a man called James Mackay, his beautiful drawings of the future that started to create longing. And for me, one of the things we don't talk about anywhere near enough in the work we do is around longing. Don DeLillo, in his book The Underworld, said longing on a large scale is what makes history. Longing on a large scale is what makes history. The work that we do has to cultivate longing. I said to somebody the other day, if the 5th Harry Potter book had been called Harry Potter and the Race to Net Zero, I don't think it would have done very well. It's not a very exciting story, is it? Actually, we need to have much more exciting things to run towards. This is another of his pictures, which is just beautiful. Extinction Rebellion in 2019 closed Waterloo Bridge for a week. They turned it into a forest. I call this a pop-up tomorrow. How do you take a place that people know really well and give people a taste of how the future could be in 2023? Recently, a group of activists rewilded Trafalgar Square for a day. How can you take places that people know really well and give them that kind of taste? And the transition movement, which I'm one of the people who's involved with that, which you can find in thousands of places, 50 countries, many places here in France as well, is the people who are just getting on with it, just starting now, planting the trees like this incredible transition group who've planted food forests all around their town. It's people who are just not waiting for permission, just starting to create that future in such a way that people can see it and experience it. Anyway, meanwhile, back in 2030, we visited this amazing place, this completely car-free place. Now many cities are just redesigning themselves, so there's no room, there's no need for cars at all. The most amazing, beautiful place, so many bicycles, trees, the air was amazing. What I want to share with you is that one of the reasons that we like to travel to 2030 is to make recordings of what it sounds like. So we can bring those recordings back to 2023 and play them to people. We call it field recordings from the future. So I want to play you a little 1-minute clip of what this area sounded like. You might like to close your eyes and imagine that you're in the Paris of 2030 with amazing trams, with bicycles, with birds and trees. And this is an actual recording from 2030. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, a little bit more excitement. This is an actual recording from 2030. How often does that happen? Okay, so you might like to close your eyes, and this is what it sounded like. So the poet Rilke once said, the future must enter into you a long time before it happens. And I think we need to find all the creative ways that we can do that. The other thing we saw in Paris now, many what were underground car parks are now filled with mushrooms being produced for food, for medicines, for replacements, for leather. It's been a huge explosion. This was a place that we went to visit where a school that had been designed by the kids. The kids had been involved in designing their own school, and as it turns out, when you ask children to design their own school, they like to have a rainforest in the middle of the school. One of the things that we found as well was that by 2030 we had developed the humility to realize that beavers were much better hydrological engineers than human beings. And so all the uplands have now been left to beavers who have restored it. Huge explosion in biodiversity, huge amounts of water stored. Democracy is now much more based around citizens' assemblies. For all big decisions are made using citizens' assemblies at all the different scales. Most cities now have a civic imagination office, a place that facilitates people to come together and be really imaginative in how they vision the future. This was a place that we visited where the municipality had bought this land to create a food garden to produce all the food for all the schools in this place. Now, 80% of all the food eaten in the schools comes from this garden, and they found that it led to a huge change in the culture of the kids, of the families, and this model has now spread everywhere. Sodexo went out of business in 2027 because the year after Total, and because this was the new model that was needed, and it just spread everywhere like wildfire. One of the places that had really kicked this off was Liège in Belgium, who in 2014 had the question, what if in a generation's time the majority of food eaten in Liège came from the land closest to Liège? By 2018, they'd already raised 5 million euros from local people and started 27 cooperatives. By 2030, this model had now spread absolutely everywhere, became the new normal, and the renewable energy that was needed, more than half of it was in community ownership. So the communities owned from it, the communities benefited from it, and everywhere we went, there was that sense of excitement and delight about what's happening. Of course, to step back into 2023 for a minute, as William Gibson said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Everything that we need to know, we're not waiting for anything. All of these things already exist. This is in Amsterdam, Utrecht, Geneva, Rotterdam, Grenoble, which is not an easy thing for an English person to say, Madrid, Lausanne in Switzerland, Freiburg in Germany, Paris, Bologna, and I didn't even tell you those stories, Montsartou near Nice, Liège, everything is already there that we need. So just to finish off, what I do in my work is around this question of how do we cultivate longing? How do we find those ways that help people to step into that future in such a way that it creates a new North Star for them? One way is through comics. I'm starting to work with an amazing Belgian cartoonist to create a comic book about our adventures to 2030. I'm doing this music project where we're making music that uses these field recordings from the future as a really immersive thing. How do we use music to create nostalgia for the future? So I think I've run out of time to tell you that story. But so I'm just going to say thank you very much. It's been beautiful traveling to 2030 with you, and power to the imagination.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. To echo and resonate with what we've just heard, we have a surprise for you right now, because in our conversation, art can sometimes tell more than words. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Minuit 12 on stage. They are... Bravo. Just a few words on Minuit 12. They are a collective of artists and dancers using body movement as an act of resistance and a way to explore new narratives about climate and biodiversity. We are now going to welcome on stage Otto Scharmer. He's the co-founder of the Presencing Institute, the author of Theory U, and he's an action researcher who co-creates innovations in learning and leadership that he delivers through classes in different institutes, and among which the MIT in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Otto Scharmer.
Mini do's to our dancers. Wow. Rob, you were sharing with me when we were walking over here that you're a close friend of Mathieu Ricard, who spoke to us this morning, and after the talk that I'm sure many of you attended, he mentioned to me that his mother, shortly before she passed away, shared with him a line that that went like this: "Stillness is the language of the future." And maybe we can also say embodied presence and movement is the language of the future. So thank you. Thank you also, Rob, for the journey into 2030, which was illuminating, and I felt like it put all of us into a different space that is very much needed, as we all know. And I feel that in our current time that's often referred to as a time of disruption, we live in a time of things breaking apart. We live in a time of collapse. We live in a time where one civilization is dying, while another civilization is in the process of being born. The one that is dying is based on extraction and ego system awareness, and the one that's in the process of being born is based on regeneration and ecosystem awareness. And when you look at this image here, this drawing, we live in between these two walls, right? We know a lot about the one on the left-hand side, which is essentially the one that's ending and dying. We know a lot less about the emerging future, about what's happened, what the future might look like. Yes, we have reports, but we don't know for sure. And what we know least about is how to move from here to there. It's the process that moves us from one side to the other. And the current moment is really a moment where we participate in both of these walls, right? We are in this in-between space. And how to do that, how to move from one to the other, how to organize around something that's emerging. has been the key question for me the past 25 years as an action researcher. And what I found is what it takes is a journey. A journey that is both an outer journey that takes us to the places of most potential. And we just had a fantastic example of that, right? All these places already exist, right? The future is already here. And it's also a journey that connects, it's also an inner journey that essentially is connecting us with our deeper sources of knowing, right? It's connecting us with that aspect of our experience where the future is already present in the now. It's not something we need to project. It's something that's already present in the now. And that's the place we want to connect with. I went to MIT some 28 years ago to learn about systems thinking. And when you look, you have seen this iceberg model many times. When you look at the world from a systems perspective, what do we see? We collectively create results that pretty much no one wants. And we heard many examples of that around the ecological divide, the social divide, and the pandemic of mental health, kind of the spiritual divide. And systems thinking essentially is asking the question, why? Why do we keep collectively enacting results that individually most people say they don't want? And these three terms, structures, paradigms of thought, and the deeper sources of our creativity, of our self, of our energy, of our inspiration, is in a nutshell, capture in a nutshell, the evolution of systems thinking in the past few decades. And to summarize, so all four levels together, including the symptoms, is something, this deepened understanding of systems thinking is something that I and some of my colleagues refer to as awareness-based systems change that can be summarized with these four principles. One, you cannot understand a system until you change it. Famously, Kurt Lewin, the founder of Action Research. You cannot study the new just by watching it from outside. Two, you cannot change a system until you transform consciousness. Let me rephrase that. You cannot change a system until you transform the mindsets of the people who are enacting the system moment to moment. So the real question is, how do we actually do that? And what we learned there is this. You can't transform consciousness until you make a system see, sense, and invert itself. So seeing itself is clear, right? It's kind of looking into the mirror, right? Kind of a systems mapping or something. Sensing is, if I only see what's broken with the system, I'm very unlikely to change my behavior. I need to feel it, right? What it feels like on the other side of the divide. And that's really the gateway to collective creativity and to real change. And the invert is really the outer and the inner, right? That I first need to change something here in order to be able to change something out there. And lastly, you can't lead systems transformation until you sense and presence or embody the future as it emerges. So be the change you want to see. What I learned, one of the main things that I learned over the years is this, that there is an invisible dimension of change and leadership that often is not talked about. So one way of articulating is this. The success of an intervention as a change maker, as a leader, depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So the success of what I do depends on not only what I do and how I do it, but from the inner place, the quality of awareness, the quality of consciousness. The quality of presence I'm showing up with, I'm bringing to a situation. so how can you map that inner place, this invisible dimension? And this is how today I would map that in terms of three capacities: open mind, open heart, open will, aka curiosity, compassion, courage. And what these capacities do is they move us beyond downloading. Downloading is same old, kind of we just reenact old patterns collectively or individually. And open mind essentially means the capacity to suspend old judgments and to see with fresh eyes. Open heart essentially means to look at a situation through the eyes of another. And open will essentially means to let go of the old and to let come of something new that is emerging. That basically, I believe, is the deeper territory of leadership. But when we look around, right, particularly in our mediarized world, what do we see? We see pretty much the exact opposite of everything I just shared with you, which is not an opening of the mind, heart, will, but a freezing of the mind, heart, and will, aka a huge amplification of ignorance, hate, anger, and fear. And so instead of this seeing and sensing, we move into the denial and desensing, right? We heard this morning many examples of this, right? Sandrine was talking about the denial industry, right? And so so we have social media and putting us into these filter bubbles and so on and so forth. So we have huge amplifiers up here, very little down here. And what I'm basically saying is this. Look, the only thing we know about the future is disruption is going to stay. Whenever disruption happens, we have a choice. And the choice is whether we respond by closing down and turning away, or whether we respond by turning toward and opening up. And when we close down and turn away, we activate one kind of process that by now we all know pretty well. While when we turn toward and open up, we activate another kind of process that by now we also know very well. So when you step back and say, okay, so these are two different social dynamics, two different social fields, we all know both of them. The first one is defined by architectures of separation and leading, right, to patterns of destruction and self-destruction, while the other one is based on architectures of connection that leads to pattern of co-creation. But then you wonder, what is the independent variable? What really does it depend on whether we activate one or the other? And I believe the answer to that question is consciousness. It's how we attend to a situation, whether that is arising from ecosystem awareness or from ecosystem awareness. And what I mean by ecosystem awareness is an awareness that originates from inside the boundary of one's own system, right? Inside the ego. And what I mean with ecosystem awareness is an awareness that originates from beyond the boundary of my system. How? By opening the mind, opening the heart, like looking kind of empathic, listening, and opening the will. So I want to give you an example for that. And the example is probably the most underrated leadership capacity of all time, which is listening. And so I want to offer you a distinction of 4 different levels of listening. And so the first one is downloading, which is not real listening, but just reconfirming what we already know. We operate from our, essentially kind of from our patterns of judgment or what our existing experience. Then it's factual listening is leading to disconfirming data, seeing something new, seeing with fresh eyes. the third level is empathic listening, seeing through another person's eyes, kind of really kind of seeing from a different perspective that was not kind of part of our understanding before. And the fourth one really is about when something new is being born, when something is beginning to emerge that wasn't there before. Okay, what I'm saying is whether the outcome is this, or this, depends on the inner place from that we operate. And I want to demonstrate that inner place with a little gesture now. And so I'm kind of, I will be embodying that. And level one is basically I'm projecting what I already know, right? It's like this. I'm not actually seeing what's happening out there. I'm projecting what I already know, and that can be in sync with or not with actually what's happening outside. Level two, factual listening, is this. So I attend very focused. I'm not looking left or right. I'm very focused on whatever my question is asking, and that's how I gather data. That's kind of how I pay attention in a focused way to reality. Level three listening is this. Empathic listening is this. So see kind of how my attention comes from here and I focus whatever the object is that I'm studying. Level three is this. I'm more connecting to the whole situation. The center of gravity of my attention is moving from here to here, right? It's still also here, but it's kind of moving to a deeper level. So that's level three attention, level three listening. We all remember that. We know these situations, right? It's a different gesture. And level four maybe could be something like this. So level four, as you saw, takes me to a different level. So it's a different inner stance, how you relate with reality. Not just in terms of, okay, who is in front of me, but reaching out more this way and also more this way. You're broadening and deepening the attention. You're decentering yourself a little bit. And you are beginning to hold a space that is not only attending to what's there, but also to what maybe is wanting to emerge. So that's the orientation of your attention. And essentially, what we do in our practical work is to practice that capacity. That's a capacity that needs to be built, and that's something that we practice. So let me just, essentially what I just said is, I demonstrated a mindset shift from an old way of looking into reality. I'm here, the observed system is out there, to one where we broaden and deepen that view by bending the beam of observation back onto the observing self. By not only attending in the simple way, but also paying attention to our attention and bringing in all these multiple perspectives. And that's something that we practice in many applied situations, a multi-stakeholder process with indigenous leaders, regenerative energy leaders, and government people in Colombia a couple of months ago, with mapping techniques, with mapping techniques that bring in the voice of the planet, the voice of future generations, and the voice of those that in the current governance system are not heard. We do that in very traditional old institutions like the UN, or the SDG leadership labs, the UN country teams and humanitarian response in 26 countries, seeing a number of interesting changes and observations there. And I want to end with a distinction that gives you a lens to look at the current reality. And it's basically a distinction between 4 types of operating system that I am observing in any kind of system I see today. So for example, and that today, and that evolves from input and authority-centric to output and efficiency-centric, to outcome and user-centric, to 4.0 regenerative and ecosystem-centric. So whereas the mainstream today, it's 2.0, right? Output and efficiency. Teaching for testing, evidence-based medicine, industrial agriculture, resource, basically sustainability in business that only focus on resource efficiency and extractive capital. We see a lot of innovation here. Many of the innovators are here, but what we need to do as a movement is to move to 4.0, and which deals with whole person, whole systems learning, strengthening the sources of well-being and health, regenerative agriculture with food as medium of healing planet and people, and so forth. So basically, what I'm saying is we face 4.0 challenges. That's what basically everyone tells us. What our societal response mechanisms are, they are limited to 2.0, sometimes 3.0, and that the hard truth is that more of this is not getting us there. What we need to do is to really focus on these kinds of ecosystems and the towns of the future, where the 2030 is already happening right now. Connect them and grow them, support them, and bring them to scale. And that one of the most important enabling conditions missing here is deep learning infrastructures that support these kinds of systems through building these deeper transformation capacities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Otto. We are now going to join Helene, Gerin, and Frederic Laloux. They are the co-founder of the WIC, and they are both authors. They are online with us from the United States. They're going to be on screen in 1 minute. All right. Hello, Helene. Hello, Frederic. Can you hear me well? Can you see the audience?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes? Do you see the audience from where you are, audience?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so you can say hi to the audience, and please make a round of applause for Helene and Frederic. So before we start, I have a few questions for you people in the audience in front of me. Please raise your hand if you're concerned. My first question is, who among you have made climate change a key priority in your life? Okay, I'm not so surprised. Okay. Who of you is sometimes frustrated and would love to shake people to make them become more active for climate? Yeah, I'm not surprised either. And who would kill to have an easy method to get these people to understand the urgency and act? Yay! Okay, so the week is for you, because this is exactly what Frederic and Helene did. My first question is really easy, at least for you. What is the week? How was it born?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were obsessed with when we started is how come we face this climate abyss, and yet there are still so few people, just a small percentage of the population that is deeply concerned about climate change and really roll up their sleeves to do things about it. And yeah, maybe like us, you find it frustrating that colleagues or clients, or maybe even within your close circles, your friends and your family members, are maybe concerned, but not really active, not rolling up their sleeves. And so one day we walked with this crazy wild dream, and we were like, what if we created a tool, but really a super powerful tool, to help us and help all of us, all of you, reach out to this very wide range of the population that, yes, is not indifferent. They are concerned, but not actively involved yet. And imagine how much power or how impactful we could be, how much impact we could have, and you could have, if people around you were as fired up as you are here in the room. So that was the starting point.
Yeah, and in practice, so the week is basically relatively short experience that happens within a week or less, where we help people, invite people to grapple so deeply with this topic of climate change and environmental destruction that they come out of it and sort of can't help but want to do something about this and become part of the mobilization. So we basically lead people through a grief journey. And it looks kind of like you, like, Dr. Scharmer just showed, of, going from the old to the new. And in practice, what it means is that groups of people, so you can't do this alone, right? You have to do it with friends, with family, with colleagues.
People who matter to you.
And you come together 3 times during a week. That's why we call it the week. And every time you watch a 1-hour film that we've very carefully scripted and written and produced. And then we set up a profound conversation for people to grapple with this. And it's actually in those conversations that sort of the magic happens. And yeah, in these 3 episodes, you basically go through grief curves. So the episode 1 is sort of hard. It's everything that most of these people have been trying to avoid. But we bring it in a way that's emotionally safe for people to go there. Like Otto said, to go from basically understanding it here to be really impacted here. And then episode 2 is at the bottom of the U, deconstructing narratives, basically, talking about this 4.0. And then, episode 3 is going up the U and being full of energy to wanting to do something about this.
So sometimes we don't hear really, really well, so I just want to quickly repeat for the audience so that everybody understands. The week is, I'm going to say it with my word, I actually organized, I'm going to say it right now, I organized the week session with my neighbors 10 days ago to live the experience before interviewing you guys. Basically, you have to meet 3 times with a bunch of people between 3 and 8, right? Is that right? 8 people maximum? Depends, okay. So I did with 8
larger
neighbors.
Groups.
Yeah. And so
larger groups can then break down in smaller groups.
Exactly.
If they want to. So people have done it with hundreds of people.
Okay, I didn't know, okay. So you meet, you watch a 1-hour episode of kind of like a documentary you did, and we see you speak and you explain everything and lots of things, data, but also a system and everything in place with environmental issues. As you said, you're using the U of Otto, who is here, the theory U. So the first episode is really dark, if I may say, like we have all the data and it's hard to swallow. The second one, you are at the bottom, so the presenting really the bottom of the U, and then you go up and you go towards the solution and the emerging futures. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's. I just want to share because we talked about that before doing the interview. One of my neighbors, who is an architect, and she's been working with authorities, public authorities for years. She was so thrilled. She was like, "It's finally the content I needed for people, the decision making, to actually act." So please, really, I don't have shares there. It's not a company, like I'm not paid, but it's actually a really, really good content to see if you want to convince. We don't convince people, but if you want your relatives, workers, co-workers, whoever, to actually understand the urgency that there is to act. The week is such a good content, among others, obviously, but it's such a good content. Voilà, that was my part. We're going to continue. So that was my reaction, but how do people react to that experience you created?
Yes, I'm happy to share more. Share more about that. But quick question first: can you hear us well enough, or you mentioned that there's a sound issue, or we just go on, right?
Do you hear well right now? It's better, actually. Yeah. So
okay, good. Yeah. So thanks for sharing how it's been like for you to experience the week. And yes, by now there's been thousands of people going through the week as well. And the amazing thing is that we start seeing super organizers. So people who like it so much that they invite other groups. Groups they don't just do it once, but they invite other people to do it because they find it really powerful. Some of the participants also even offer to subtitle the version. So we have two versions, an English and French audio version. But we also have now 6 subtitle versions in Polish, German, Dutch, Spanish, Danish, and Swedish.
So we can share.
So it's nice to see it spread across Europe. And people organize it either at home or in their universities, in their communities, or in the workplace. That's a very important place where the week is watched and shared. And in the workplace, it can be, we see it spread in very large corporations, in very large companies, with thousands of employees going through it. But we also see it also in smaller companies, say where the entire staff, 30 or 40 people, they all go through, which is really powerful for them after, because they have a shared language, a common language, and shared goals when it comes to climate change.
You have to imagine like a whole organization that goes through sort of a grief process and comes out of it sort of energized to do something. So it's, you know, what we hear, it's really powerful to bring about sort of a culture and system change.
In it's not a documentary, but like in the process, in the experience of the week, you bring up several times the tipping point. It's something that is famous for activists and people trying to bring change, the famous tipping point. Can you explain to the audience, to the people who might not be aware of it, what is the tipping point, and are you hopeful that eventually we will arrive to that tipping point and bring systemic change?
Yeah. I mean, we know about the bad tipping points, right? The climate tipping points that we absolutely have to avoid, but there are positive tipping points, you know, social tipping points, right? And different academics believe that sometimes when we just reach 20 to 30% of the population that is deeply convinced about something, you get a tipping point. And we see that in history, right? Like we've had these, you know, moments where suddenly systems tip, where we go from feudal systems to democracy, where slavery was everywhere and then it becomes unthinkable. And it can go sometimes very fast. And what often happens is that, you know, there's people who are leaving the old way of thinking. But in the beginning, you don't see anything until enough people do that and suddenly the system shifts, right? And I think that is our best hope, right? And that's what we feel like we can do, and that I feel everybody can do, because each one of us and each one of you in this room, we all have networks that we belong to in our communities, in our workplace. And so we can all play a part in helping more people get there so that we get there faster and hopefully get there in time. And yeah, the week is one tool that you can use to invite those people and, you know, get them to see things differently and go to the other side.
I don't have the right number in mind, but I think it's something like if 2% of the population, and stop me if I'm wrong, if 2% of the population is really convinced and really active, I think they can bring 12.5, maybe you guys know the answer, you know, on the other side, and that will bring the tipping point. Do you have data on that or the right numbers?
There's different data, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but yeah, it sounds like a small percentage that
Can
are
be
really
enough to-
active.
Like system tips.
Yeah.
And do you think we're close to that? Again, we don't have data, but can you give us hope at least?
Well, talking about hope, I'll speak for myself, at least. I'm not sure. This is not really a question that I ask myself whether I'm optimistic or whether I'm hopeful or not. I just do. I go into action mode because simply I just don't want to have regrets. I want to be able to tell my kids I knew what was happening and I've done everything I could. That's the only thing that matters to me. And action for me is the best medicine. It's the best antidote to anxiety or doubt or procrastination. And this is, the tipping points that Fred was referring to. That's the energy and the focus that I want to look at mostly. Yeah.
Frederic, are you hopeful or are you in action as well? What's your...
I agree with that. Like, I feel like, depending on the news that I look at and where I look, I can be totally depressed. We will never get there. Like, it looks hopeless. And then I look at all of the amazing people and all of the amazing things that happen. And if I look at that, I cannot help but be hopeful. So which is true? I don't know. And ultimately, I've come to the realization that, my projection doesn't really matter because I don't think I have a crystal ball. And so really what does matter is my inner fire, is me deciding I want to do what I can do. And like Helene says, like, I don't want to have regrets. Whether we make it in time or not, I want to be able to say, hey, I've done everything I could. And in the meanwhile, it's been an amazing adventure. I'm convinced about that, is that the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to be a collective adventure for humanity like we've never seen. And so the question for me is not so much, do I have hope or not, is, do I want to be in the middle of the adventure or do I want to be in the sideline? And, the sideline sounds kind of boring, so I want to be in the middle. And so that for me is really the answer to that question.
Helene, as you were saying, the best medicine is action. So what do you want to share to the audience before we say goodbye to make them take action, to give people the envy to take action?
Well, there are many things one can do, but there's at least one thing that we can invite you all to do now is if you want to continue the work that you've been doing these days at ChangeNOW, then you can sign up sign up to watch the week on your own with your friends, with your group of friends or family if you want. But you can also try it first. There's a special invitation that ChangeNOW is inviting you to, and there's a QR code that is probably on the screen.
Yes.
I don't know if you see it now, but 3 dates in June so that you can watch it together and have the conversations afterward that Fred mentioned that are super meaningful after each episode. And it could be a wonderful way to keep having conversation and do the meaningful work that you've been doing.
So you can take out your phone and point it to to the QR code and see if those dates work for you. And that's a good way to test
June
it.
27th, 28th, 29th. And beyond that, feel free to invite your clients, your colleagues, your partners to do the week at a larger scale. And
the website is theweek.ooo.
So www.theweek.ooo. And feel free to invite people around you, your colleagues, your partners, your clients, because we often have larger networks than we think. So maybe there are small, medium, large networks around you that you could invite to watch the week with you. And perhaps there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of people you could bring to reach the tipping point that we were talking about.
And one more thing that I wanted to say, we live on the other side of the ocean. That's why we couldn't be in Paris with you. But our friend and colleague, Badraka, who's in Paris and worked for the week, is in the room. I don't know, Badraka, if you could stand up and make a big sign.
Hello.
So if any of you want to talk with us about the week, have any ideas, any suggestions, any
Reach out to
collaborations,
Badraka. He's here.
look at what Badraka looks like, and you can talk with him, have conversations with him.
Thank you so much, Frederic. Thank you, Helene. Please make a round of applause for them. Thank you very much. And just one quick word to finish on the week. Part of the experience is really the sharing with other human beings in the room. It's not only watching the documentaries. So if you can go to those dates organized, really, it's like we've cried together with my neighbors, like for real. So it's a real experience that you can share with people, your colleagues, friends, family, whoever. It's now time to welcome Arawana Hayashi. She's the co-founder of the Social Presenting Institute with Otto Scharmer, that was here before. She's the co-director of the Social Presenting Theater. She's a dancer, a choreographer, a movement teacher with roots in Asian and Western arts. She will present us with the methodology in engaging with meeting with social fields, the review process, that we've just been exposed, obviously, and brings in the qualities of embodied presence and the coherence with the earth body and our social body. Ladies and gentlemen, Arawana.
It's the end of the day. So much to think about, right? And to feel. So maybe that's our work is a lot about feeling in a way. And I loved what Rob said about longing. So I was thinking about the title, Change Now, and wondering how much of our life is actually now. That so much of it is what we think, what we remember, what we learned, our assumptions, our beliefs, our opinions, our likes and dislikes, that came from the past, right? Or else it's all of our imaginations and hopes and fears in the future. Or it's our chattering about this and that. But the profundity of now seems resonant, you know? What is it now to be a human being on this planet? What is it to be in this body, on our good Mother Earth body, in our social body, us here today? What is that now? And in that now, there's so much longing. And there's so much intelligence and wisdom and so much healthiness. I loved this morning, Mathieu said, the banality of goodness, the ordinariness of just how much just basic sanity, basic healthiness, basic love for this world is in us now. And how little we access it oftentimes. We're not short of wisdom on this planet. But we are short on accessing that. And the work that we do at Presencing Institute, and probably that many of you do, is about how to make that visible, to make all the wisdom that we have in this room felt, and then to be able to step forward with some courage, bravery, what we call an action confidence that's actually based on our care for this world, our love for this world, and our own sort of basic healthiness. So when we are now, there's always change. You know, thoughts come and go. Like this big sky here, right? The mind is like a sky, a big sky. Thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, you know, our opinions come and go. But once we hang on and we say, this is me, this is how it is, what are we going to do about this now? Once we hang on, right, we lose our own wisdom. We lose our own creativity, our own kind of naturalness to create a better world. So my invitation today was to do some practice with everyone. My job has to do with connecting this body with the Mother Earth body and with the social body, and that there's coherence. That when the mind is more, not so fixated, then it sits on the body, and we do not lose track of what it is to stand, what it is to walk, what it is to sit down, what it is to, as Otto said, to actually listen with the whole body, not just the ears, right? But to listen with the heart, right? To listen with the body, with the belly listens. It has ears, right? The whole body sees, not just the eyes, but there's resonance. There's always a feeling of connection. There's not a prayer that we're not connected to each other and to every tree, every fox, every elephant, every ant on the planet, every river, every bird. There's not a prayer that we're not connected. And yet we often don't feel that, right? We don't feel. So much of our work at Presencing Institute is this, as Otto said, a mind that isn't completely filled with its own knowing and intelligence, and that it has a little room to not know and to just be open and to listen. And then the sense of the open heart, not just for those that we naturally love, our friends, families, people that vote like we do, people in our kind of tribe, but also for people that we actually don't like, actually don't trust, actually don't agree with. How do we extend our own warmth, at least our own sense of humanity, to include all of our beings on the planet, particularly those whose voices we decide not to listen to. Otto often uses this expression, attentional violence. We just don't pay attention to some creatures and to some people and to some places. We don't attend. And in terms of our open will, it's a really interesting one, open will, because it often has, for many of us, and maybe for all of us here, it connects with fear. Like, and in our work, it's like fear is such an ally, Once there's fear, we just take incredible interest. What does it feel like? So that we can develop our own sense of bravery and courage to step forward when we do not know. So in our work, not knowing is a kind of intelligence. And not doing is actually a necessary balance to doing and to acting. But that there has to be some kind of stillness. I love this, about stillness as the voice of the future. So, okay, so maybe we do a little practice. Is that okay? I know it's really warm and late in the day. But we'll do nothing. How's that? And then that won't take any exertion at all. So, but I do want you to put your feet on the ground, seat on your chair, sit up in the chair if you can for a minute so you're not leaning back, but to use your own core belly for holding you up. I can't demonstrate here because there's no chair, so I just do it standing. You can do it standing too if you want, if it's okay. So we're just going to start really simply by feeling our place on the planet right now, which means that we're going to let thoughts go and we're going to feel loyalty, some kind of loyalty and faithfulness to this body. So we're going to feel, just let thoughts go a bit so that we can rest our attention. Sometimes that's called mindfulness. We're going to rest our attention on the feeling of the body and its place on the planet right now. Right? That every single being on the planet has a place, has a spot. And for each of us, the Mother Earth is just holding on to us, right? Otherwise, we'd float off into space. She's holding us close. So just take a moment. And now, if you can, just stay with your low body sitting on the earth. You have a place, your body and the earth's body have a coherence. Then if you have some sense of the back body is present, all of our ancestors, all of our mentors and teachers before us who have contributed to making a good world, whose lives have been devoted through their craft or their profession or their family life, their community life. Their lives are devoted to helping out, to making a good world. And they are all behind us, cheering us on. Strength to the back, like a mountain. The top of the head, always in conversation with the sky, so that we feel that our body joins the vast open sky of possibility, all that we can imagine for the future, for our grandchildren's children, is open mind of sky-like mind. And then take a moment to just feel the heart. This heart which delights, appreciates, is grateful. The heart holds some joyfulness and also some sorrow and sadness and grief for the degree of suffering that this earth feels and that other humans feel, animals, birds, fish. So we just take a moment to feel this sad joy heart. Just sitting here being a human being. It's a human being practice of doing nothing, just being human. Perfect. Now, if you can, just as you are, sitting as you are, you can open your eyes if you had them closed, so that we have a sense of our environment. And I want you to just do a little bit of practice in embodied presence, okay? Can you move from sitting to standing in one gesture? You sit, now feel, don't think about it, just feel, stand. Whoop, everyone. Huh? Now, okay, I'm going to ask you to, that's great, great. I know we're holding stuff, so there's all this wiggly adjustment also. Can you do it without so much wiggly? Put your things to the side on the floor. Can you? Okay, just, you're a standing human being on the planet, right? Look out at the tower and the sky, right? Now, feel the body, don't think, and sit. Oh, nice. Good. That's all you're doing is sitting and standing, right? If there's thinking, just let that go. Okay, once more. Stand. And sit. Last time. Stand. Perfect. Now, here's the next thing. Can you just make a gesture to your neighbor that says, this is how I feel right now. Make a gesture. This is a gesture that says, this is how I feel right at the moment. You're not saying, you're just showing somebody. Okay? Person one is showing to person two. Okay? Now, is person one making their shape? Okay. Person one is making their shape. This is how I feel now. Now, okay? Stay with your body. Let the body move now. Right? Let the body move. What would the body like to do now? Okay? What would it like to do? What would this shape like to do? Here we go. Begin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you're in shape 2. Oh, don't forget it. Hold. Now, what would this shape like to say to that person? What would this shape like to say? One word that it would like to say. Just say that to your person. Okay. Okay, just one word. Okay, now, person 2, right? Person 2 is going to show how they feel right now, whatever that is, like your current reality. Then what does the body want to do? Just do whatever that is. It doesn't matter what it is. It moves into something else. You stop there. You say one word that your shape would like to say to that person. What would your body like to say to that person? Okay? Person 2, make your shape. Sculpture 1, we call this. Okay? And move. 1. What does your body want to do? Don't think about it. 2, 3, 4, 5. Sculpture 2. What does your body like to say to the other person? Somebody's holding the space for you to do your gesture. What is it? Okay. All right. Thank you. That's perfect. Very embodied. So I would like to ask Jace to come. I think that my time is finished, so we want Jace to come. Jace, another colleague of ours from Presencing Institute, also bringing art, social arts movement, and in her case, visual art, to our gathering. And I let her say what she's going to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Helen. Yes? Oh, you can go. Yeah? Oh, okay, so I'm with Jace Pei-Yu-Lee. She's a visual catalyst and scribe, is that right?
Scribe.
Scribe, sorry, what did I say? Scribe, French. Scribe, obviously. So you've been scribing, do I say it right? Scribing?
Scribing in French, yes.
Scribing. Again, sorry. So scribing for the whole time. So we are now going to watch a 2-minute video in silence, and that's part of the purpose.
Yes.
Okay.
So I've been listening to the conversation for this session at the back. So it's actually a 2 minutes of journey of today together with you. It will be in silent, but that reflects the moments that we've been here together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jace. Thank you so much. We're now going to watch the video. Yes. So as you know, it is the end, but right before we leave, please close your eyes for just 15 seconds. That's the last bit of experience you're going to have with us today. After watching this video, what do I see? What do I sense? And what do I feel? I'm going to give you one last bit of info, and as you leave, you can share what you see, what you sense, and what you feel with your neighbor. The last information we've heard, and I've met 3 people from the Presencing Institute today, and that was a great honor. If you want to go further, you can go to uschool.org, so you, like the theory you, -school.org, and there are some free online course on the ULab course that is free. It's every year, and the U School for Transformation, which is a platform. Thank you so much. Please make a last round of applause for our amazing guests.